So this is a moment in time. I think you'll hear from the presentation I have much of the same of what Stephanie's been talking about and Chris has been talking about. Chris is right, it has been an extraordinary year. And in this context, many times I've thought, you know, what am I going to talk about here? And I think what I can do is just offer, this is what it could be. This is what it could look like. Some ideas, some thoughts. I'm really mindful of a few things. What the immigrant settlement sector is, you know, what is it? You know, it's different in different parts of the country. Although traditionally the multi-service organization that grew out of the 60s and 70s, response to the waves of refugees coming into the country, we're now joined by public sector organizations, universities, colleges, school boards, large national organizations like the YWCA, United Way, smaller focused organizations and mainstream organizations like the Chambers of Commerce. I'm also aware that there's a wide range in the level of maturity of the settlement sector, based partly on the age of the organization and also the years in which, in that province, the province stepped up and decided that they were going to take part in immigration. I also realize I'm coming as president of ARAISA, the Atlantic region of immigrant settlement agencies. So you can take my thoughts as kind of being grounded in the realities of the Atlantic. So we, as the established settlement sector, have been supporting newcomers, temporary residents, 30, 40 years. Many of us started in those one-room basements, developed programs that respond to the needs of the people before us. Over the last 15 years, we've significantly increased with levels of funding that have been made available, both federally and provincially. The sector has matured and we've adapted. We now are complex, sophisticated professional organizations. We've used our ability to combine federal, provincial, and other funding and partnerships to offer comprehensive and coordinated continuum of services. We know no newcomers don't want to shop around. We know they don't want to get lost, and they want services that are linked and coordinated. But there are other players, NGOs, public, private organizations that provide really, really important services. So we can see them as competitors or we can see them as partners in the vital work of immigrant settlement. Especially in smaller cities, and I'm including the Atlantic in this, there's a real opportunity to collaborate, to develop service hubs where organizations share space and administrative functions, where there's one intake, one needs assessment, really clear referral processes, where childcare is available in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the evening for different programs. I also confess here, I'm also the product of a really successful merger of two organizations 7 years ago, so I'm really interested in this collaboration piece. I'm also not so naive to appreciate that it may not always work, but in some places this interagency coordination's already in place and working really successfully. And in this model, as well as one intake, what if we use the advances in technology so that reporting, I'm coming back to the reporting bit, and data collection were not burdensome but relevant to both us and funders. Right now, funders get reports on what they paid for. From a financial accountability perspective, I think Stephanie's probably getting what she needs, but she's not getting it from an immigrant outcome perspective. When many of us have multiple and really complex organizational program funding arrangements, funders get reports on partial client outcomes. At ISANS, for instance, we have a program for internationally educated engineers, 80-20% split. IRCC gets 20% of the information and the other funder gets 80% of the information. The only people who know how internationally educated engineers are doing is the organization that's running it. And nobody asks us how our engineers are doing. They're asking us for, what did I get for my money? But everybody knows this. It's not like people don't know. We know this. Funders know this. We know that, recognize the lunacy of it. As a sector, it's a really heavy administrative burden taken away from service delivery capacity. And for the funder, it's an inaccurate and incomplete picture. There's got to be a better way. It's about accountability, federal, provincial relationships, government performance measurement, financial management systems, exchange of confidential client data. I know it's not a simple fix, but it takes partnership, it takes trust, it takes flexibility, and most of all, it takes the will to tackle it. Interestingly, this issue has really come up with the Syrians. So many of us in the room will have been bombarded with questions around success stories, you know, the success stories for the Syrians. And for the most part, success stories means did they get a job? And for certainly at ISANS, where I work, neither the Office of Immigration nor IRCC is funding those programs. So they're not getting that information. But they want that information. Of course they do. And it's important information, which is why I've been bending Stephanie's ear with, you're not asking the right questions. So what if there were wide-scale technology investments, recognizing that each organization is developing its own data management systems and processes? You already have it in Ontario with HEARTS. So you have one system, provincial, federal. In other parts of the country, we put in data into 3 or 4 systems. It's real great fun. At ISANS, we're now in probably the 4th iteration of data management tool development. And I wonder why we're not working together to be able to do that now. Cassie has already done some great work and has shared their tool, their data management tool across the country. I think we're now mature enough to do this, but there's no systematic way for us to be able to share this innovation. We as a sector get accountability. We want it for ourselves. We have a great need for capacity to analyze our service delivery and the outcomes from it. I know IRCC would very much like us to be able to help them to determine what's working. As an executive director, I want to know what's working. I want to know, do we let this program go or this program go? What are the outcomes? What are the outcomes I want? And if I let this program go, what's the impact of that? And many of us are in the room are looking at the same thing. But in an absence of agreement around outcomes and indicators, it's just more difficult. We can do it, it's just more difficult. So technology is also changing the way we deliver services. Some of the larger organizations have already developed sophisticated technical expertise and tools for distance learning, pre-arrival. But I don't think we as a sector have really embraced it and found ways to optimize the opportunities that technology can play in our future, even though it's already having a major impact on what we do. We've seen it with pre-arrival and distance services. Many of us are waking up to the realization that the old boundaries determined our scope for service delivery are no longer relevant. Online staff at my organization have been telling me for quite a few years, doesn't matter where people are. Beijing, London, Marion Bridge in Cape Breton, or the northern parts of Ontario, we can provide service. In the sector, we're having a really interesting discussion about this face-to-face pre-arrival, post-arrival online. But I don't think anyone will question the impact that new technologies are having that allow the delivery of services from an agency in Halifax to a client who is going to or already in Vancouver. It may not be the optimal mode of delivery. It might not be the face-to-face service that many of us would want. But we also have to recognize that we have a new client base. They're younger. Well, everybody's younger. They're more tech-savvy. They expect responses that are immediate. They want information in those discrete chunks. And they're not using their computers. They're using their phones, thank you, to get information. We saw it with the Syrian refugees. Many of us quickly realized the best way to get to Syrian refugees was through WhatsApp. Thank you. And while we're talking about online and technology, what about pre-arrival services? We know the system is not working right now. If the target, as Corinne talked about this week at the National Settlement Council, is 100% economic class immigrants using online pre-arrival, what if we had one funnel system where people were trying to get in? I know it's not easy. And it's easier in the Atlantic, honestly, where there are larger organizations and many fewer than you have in other parts of the country. And in terms of technology, it's a real opportunity for us. We've got to get better at using mobile phone functions, social media, webinars, video conferencing. We need to explore the potential of these new technologies to enhance our work, to improve what we do, and to create new opportunities to respond to service need. But we have to recognize that technology leaders amongst us are going to have to lead the way. We can't all do this independently. With knowledge and expertise comes an opportunity, but it also comes as a responsibility to share. It's already happening to some extent, mostly through the personal relationships of leaders across the country. But we've got to up this. We've got to make it work. We also have the opportunity to use partnership more effectively and also with greater potential for positive impact. Although many of us were working with partners on systemic issues like poverty, affordable housing, social assistance rates before the Syrian Refugees Initiative, what has happened, certainly in the Atlantic region, is that with the outpouring of community support and the numbers of private sponsors, community members are for the first time understanding what living on social assistance rates looks like, what poverty looks like, what using food banks looks like, what 682 rental apartment looks like. We have an army of influential and articulate supporters now who, with the right leadership, we can mobilize to help effect change. We have to assume that mantle of leadership, capitalize on the current interests and support, align ourselves with other marginalized groups in strategic partnerships to seek and achieve systemic change. It's the only way we're going to be able to respond to some of these really, really difficult situations, and we can't do it alone. But it's not only policy change and service delivery we can't do alone. We can't build that welcoming community, and we don't need to do it alone now. We need to maximize the interest that's already out there. Community schools, neighborhoods, they all play their role. We've always done this work, but it's broader now, it's deeper, and it's more critical. The world around us is changing. We can't be complacent. The conversations, the nationalist fervor taking place to the south of us and in Europe can just as easily take hold here. We've already seen evidence of it. We have a responsibility to move on this. Right now, there's support for immigration from Canadians. Numbers are unlikely to decrease drastically in the next few years. We heard that from the minister. And we as a sector have demonstrated in such an evident way this year that we have the expertise to respond quickly and efficiently to a changing environment, to a changing client profile. We're probably going to continue to see this wide range of client profile with a wide range of settlement needs. We're going to find ourselves in deeper and broader collaborations with social service agencies. In some communities, those social service agencies are starting to take the role that they should have taken years ago. And that's great. In other smaller centres, it's probably going to continue to be the settlement sector that's going to have to step up. We've been seeing an increased role for employers for a number of years. And you heard this morning the Atlantic Immigration Pilot, which is being rolled out next year as part of the Atlantic Growth Strategy. We'll be asking employers to contribute financially and also in a more settlement service delivery level. We'll see how that goes. It's a pilot right now, but we've got to keep an eye on that one. And that brings me to the whole issue of the sector as revenue generating, because let's face it, the employers have neither the skills nor do they want to provide settlement services. Who are the employers going to come to? I think to date we vastly undervalued our knowledge. We have such experience in things like language training, translation, interpretation, online, distance education, business training, cross-cultural education, employer supports, workplace education. We're doing all this right now, and all have strategic business potential. I know it's not an easy discussion to have. On many fronts, our hands are tied by funders' restrictions. Many of us will not want to go down that road. Many of us will not have the capacity to go down the entrepreneurial road. But it brings into question the government's essential role in supporting social programming, and in our case, settlement services. But we do need to have the conversation, because this is how we can invest in and expand the crucial work we do. So in conclusion, what do we look like in 10 years? I think we'll see fewer smaller organizations, more strategic partnerships, more technical innovation, enhanced credibility, and a wider understanding for what we do. Ongoing capacity to implement and share innovative practices, increased private sector involvement, increased independence and legitimacy through using our entrepreneurial spirit. And with all this comes a new and stronger relationship with our federal and provincial funders. What could hold us back? It may not be the government that will hold us back. It'll be ourselves that hold us back. This week, Minister McCallum and Corinne both talked about the visibility of settlement services, of how the work we do transcends the IRCC department's responsibilities. We always knew that. We always knew that our work was much wider. Now others know it too. There's a feeling of such optimism in the sector, and honestly, I think to a great extent, the future is ours for the taking. We just got to go there.